On today's show, a Locked on Rockets listener mailbag. What is Jae'Sean Tate's role this upcoming season for the Rockets? What about Amen Thompson's impact, the expectations for his rookie season? What's the best style of play for this young Rockets team? And who's on my own personal Rockets Mount Rushmore? That and so much more coming up right here at Locked on Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short roll. Oh, my, that's the no-look.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari, Eason.
Here comes Tari.
No!
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked on NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked on Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked on Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making LOR part of your day every single day. I promised a listener mailbag, and that was a little bit earlier this month. Had some things kind of, popping up here and there, getting in the way of being able to get this knocked out, but I promised it. So here we are. Thank you to everybody who chimed in, dropped in a question, whether it was via Twitter, YouTube, wherever. Thank you for reaching out, sharing your thoughts. A lot to tackle on today's show. A lot of really good questions here. However, I got an overwhelming number of questions about one thing in particular. Like 5 or 6 different people asked about Jae'Sean Tate and what his role is going to be this upcoming season for the Rockets. And so that's where we want to start things off on today's episode, because I feel like Jae'Sean Tate has become a bit of a polarizing figure amongst Rockets fans. I feel like there are some Rockets fans, and I feel like I can't even say we're in the vocal minority here. I feel like there's some Rockets fans that are still cautiously optimistic about the type of role that Jae'Sean Tate can have on this team and the impact that he can have, myself included. And then I feel like there's the overwhelming majority of Rockets fans who are they're ready for Jae'Sean Tate to be shipped off to the next team. They're ready for him to be gone. They're ready for him to not be in a Rockets jersey anymore. And I don't necessarily quite understand why. And, well, let me backtrack. I kind of get it, right? So let's weigh things here before we get into what his role is actually going to look like. Right? Jae'Sean Tate, he's a bit of an older player. He, especially this past season, I think, was a bit more tunnel visioned, focused on getting his own shots, although I feel like you could say that about the entire team. Missed a chunk of the year due to injury. Obviously has been, stuck in, with just as much of the Silas tax as Jalen Green or Alperen Sengun or any of these other young players on this team. But he is a bit older, right? He's not necessarily part of the quote unquote young core that this team has. But I do think he can have a really positive impact on these guys. First off, he is absolutely the type of player that Ime Udoka just adores, right? Defense first, gritty mentality, hustle guy, glue guy, all that stuff. That's exactly who Jae'Sean Tate is. As a leader, he is invaluable for this young Rockets team, right? He is a guy whose voice carries weight in that Rockets locker room. And it might not have mattered as much this past season or these past couple years when there were very little to almost no expectations and the team knew they were going to be bad every year going in, all that. That suddenly changes, right? You need guys to be able to hold other guys accountable when there are standards, right? When there are expectations that have to be met. And Jae'Sean Tate, along with Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks and Jock Landale and Jeff Green, all these veteran voices, even though you don't think of Jae'Sean Tate as a vet, he is older than all these other young kids, right? He's not another 20, 21-year-old kid. He's a guy who's had to work his ass off to get to where he is as an NBA player. And those guys respect him, right? His voice carries a lot of weight in that locker room. So for his role this next season, internally, the Rockets as an organization are still incredibly high on what Jae'Sean Tate brings to the table, as am I, frankly, because he's a guy that defends at a high level. Yes, he fouls a lot. So does Dillon Brooks. A lot of the NBA elite defenders foul at a very high level. I need to go pull the list because a lot of the NBA's top defenders are in the top 10 of fouls per 36 or whatever the metric is. And Dillon Brooks is right there with the rest of them. So yes, he fouls a lot. Sometimes the fouls are kind of stupid fouls. I get that. Hopefully that's something that Ime can help him cut back on. But his role this next season isn't going to be anything much different than it's been in the past. Although I do think positionally on the court, it'll shift a little bit. And that's kind of the biggest thing for me moving into this next season, as I think Jae'Sean Tate is going to play more on the wing this next season than he will at the 4 spot, or even at times as an undersized 5, not necessarily being on the front line, right? There's not really a reason why Jae'Sean Tate should ever, he's probably at times going to be the 3rd biggest guy on the floor, whereas in the past, like when he was starting alongside Christian Wood, he was like the 2nd biggest guy on the court, playing the power forward spot. And when you're 6'4" and that's your power forward position, you've got a 6'10", 6'11" Christian Wood as your 5. You're just begging for teams to steamroll you in the rebounding department, right? I think him transitioning more towards playing on the wing, he's still a bit undersized at 6'4", but his role is going to be very similar to Dillon Brooks, right? When he's out there, he's going to take the toughest defensive assignment. He's going to allow the Rockets to play a very versatile switch everything defense when he's out there. And offensively, he did get a bit more tunnel vision this past season. Again, I think you could say that, make that argument about everybody on this team. But offensively, I'm really hoping we see him get back more so towards his rookie and sophomore season roots, where he was kind of that point forward-esque, facilitator, where he would defend at a high level, but he would also set really high quality screens. He would roll. He would make passes out of the short roll. He would drive and kick to shooters open on the perimeter. Kind of some of the things that we saw that gave us that little miniature vision of like a mini Draymond Green-esque for the Rockets, right? That's where so much of the hype came from Jae'Sean Tate during his rookie and sophomore seasons. And that kind of, fell off a little bit this past year. And it's unfortunate that it did, because to me, I think Jae'Sean Tate can absolutely still be a really important part of any 8 or 9-man rotation in the NBA, especially a team that wants to take a step in the right direction and move forward and be a better team. Jae'Sean Tate is a winning basketball player. He hasn't had a chance to really showcase that a ton because the Rockets have been a bad team ever since he made it to Houston. But I do think, and me plus like a very small minority of Rockets fans are cautiously optimistic about the impact that he'll be able to have this upcoming season, and that his role, I kind of think we're in for a Jae'Sean Tate renaissance, if you will. I think that he's going to come out and surprise a lot of people, and I think a lot of Rockets fans are actually going to be eating their own words when they see just how impactful and important he could be to this team. I will say all of that with the caveat that Ime Udoka has said multiple times now, you will have to earn your keep. You will have to earn your role on this team. There is a possibility that in training camp, Cam Whitmore outplays Jae'Sean Tate, right? And Cam Whitmore could very easily earn those backup small forward minutes behind Dillon Brooks. Do I think that's a likely outcome? Probably not. Cam Whitmore's still incredibly raw. He's a much better offensive player than Jae'Sean Tate, just as far as offensive bag goes. I think Tate is a better playmaker at this point, and he's a better overall piece to plug into a team construct. Cam is still really raw, incredibly talented, absolutely. But all it means is that these guys are going to have to really work to earn their spots, right? Nothing is going to be guaranteed to Jae'Sean Tate. Nothing is going to be guaranteed to Cam Whitmore. Nothing is guaranteed to Tari or Jabari or Jalen or Dillon or Fred or KPJ. All these guys have to fight and claw to earn the minutes they're going to get. Because if you're not putting in 110% effort, there's another guy like 2 spots down the roster who wants those minutes, who could be plugged into those minutes if you're dragging ass, not putting the best foot forward. So that's what I think. I think that's going to be Jae'Sean Tate's role this next season. He's going to play off the bench behind Dillon Brooks. He's going to get anywhere from 12 to 18, maybe 20 minutes a night, give or take. And I know a lot of Rockets fans are kind of upset about that. He's older. He's not one of the young guys, but you do need some of those stabilizing glue guy type pieces to hold together the other talent, right? You don't need 4 or 5 really raw, untapped young guys out there who are just guns blazing at all times, because that's how you get really sloppy, messy basketball, right? You need guys who can be out there and make an impact, who don't necessarily need the ball in their hands, who can play high-quality defense, who can do the dirty work on both sides of the basketball, who can set high-quality screens, all of that. And that's exactly what Jae'Sean Tate brings to the table. Coming up, I want to get into some of the expectations for Amen Thompson, his rookie year. What kind of impact can we expect from him? The best style of play for this Houston Rockets team, right? What would be the best way for them to find success this upcoming season? And also, who's on my personal Rockets Mount Rushmore? And many other questions coming up in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets back guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. Right now, you can take a look over at FanDuel to decide who the NFL 58 outright betting favorites are. And right now, it's the Kansas City Chiefs at plus 600, Philadelphia Eagles at plus 800, the Buffalo Bills at plus 900, and rounding up the top five, you have the Bengals and the 49ers at plus 1,000 apiece. Texans are bringing up the rear there at plus 18,000. 18,000 to win it all for your Texans. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, before getting into the expectations for Amen Thompson's rookie season, our next question on the mailbag list, we've got, which of the players that the Rockets let go this free agency are you going to miss the most? Now, I already talked about this in the episode the other day, talking about whether or not the Rockets should bring back Usman Garuba. I will miss Garuba, but I think of all the players that the Rockets let go, I'm going to miss KJ Martin a ton, mostly because he was one of the most genuine personalities on the entire team. He was always so open every time you had a question for him. He was very candid in his responses. He would connect with us, the media members, like in the locker rooms, pregame, postgame. He was just a really cool dude. Not to mention he was a high-flying, electric athlete. I made the point, though, the other day. I think that as far as ceilings of, contributing quality type players, though, I think Garuba might have a slightly higher ceiling as far as just a piece that can conceivably be, a solid part of an 8-9 man roster one day. 6'8", versatile defender, all that. So I do think I'm going to miss KJ Martin a lot just from his personality, some of the insane highlights, all that. But I think as far as a piece that I think could have still meant something to this team and been really impactful with Ime Udoka and the new coaching staff and the new direction, I think I'm going to miss Usman Garuba a little bit more. Next question we're on to Amen Thompson. What are some tangible expectations for Amen this season? What kind of impact do you see him having with being in with the starters or the bench unit? So with Amen, I think it's really beneficial for a lot of rookies. We saw it with Benedict Mathurin, being able to come in as a rookie and not necessarily be given the ultimate green light and being able to almost in a way take a back seat, come off the bench, kind of learn from the guys ahead of you in the rotation, learn from the other veteran pieces around you. There's some benefit to being able to do that. And so for Amen to be able to come in and not have to be the starting point guard right away, which is arguably the hardest position on the floor to learn at the NBA, or really at any level, but especially at the NBA level, right? You're quarterbacking the entire offense. So for Amen to not have to come in and immediately shoulder that weight by himself, right? He gets to come in and kind of work himself into that position. There's going to be moments where he is able to run the offense completely with that second unit with, alongside KPJ as his backcourt running mate. There's going to be moments where he's sharing the floor with some of the starters. I think one of the most exciting kind of trios that I'm looking forward to seeing this next season is when we see Fred VanVleet, Amen Thompson, and Jalen Green all share the floor in tandem with one another, because that's effectively your starting backcourt in VanVleet and Jalen Green. But then you also have Amen Thompson, who offensively can slot in and actually you put the ball in his hands and you play VanVleet and Jalen off of him and space the floor with those two guys and have those guys on either wing. But then you have Amen Thompson running the show. And then defensively, and this is where things get so interesting when you have a 6'7" point guard like Amen Thompson, is it gives you so much versatility to where he can go guard the opposing team's best player, or he can go guard the opposing team's small forward, and you're not at a mismatch, or you're not, suscepting yourself to a mismatch because you have a VanVleet and a Jalen out there and an Amen Thompson. You're not putting yourself, over a barrel because you're running three guards. So I'm excited to see what he's able to do with both of those lineups. I think him coming off the bench, I think we're going to see a lot of lineups that are built to favor Amen Thompson. Like, I'm fully expecting a lot of Jabari Smith Jr. at the 5 and some Jeff Green at the 5, especially in lineups that feature Amen Thompson because they want to be able to space the floor 5 out. They want to be able to give him as much space as possible for him to operate so we can really see what it looks like when he's running the show, but not being kind of hamstrung by a lack of floor spacing or being out there with another, quote unquote, non-shooter. But that said, we're also going to see probably a pretty steady diet of him playing alongside, Alperen Sengun at times to see how he looks running a pick and roll or playing with Jock Landale and, running a little 1-5 action there with 3 guys spaced out on the perimeter, stuff like that. For expectations, I mean, I do think that Amen Thompson kind of has the type of game where you think that he is going to be able to make an impact as a rookie. I think it's rare when you see a player who can come in and be a positive impact as a rookie, but I think that given the scope of his role, the fact that he's only going to be getting anywhere from 15 to 20-ish minutes a night, it's not going to be like he's getting this, 30-plus minute load to where he's going to be able to make a lot of mistakes and have a lot of issues. And I'm expecting Ime Udoka to hold him accountable just like every other player on this roster, right? He comes in a little bit young or a little bit older than some of his peers, a little bit older than Jalen and Jabari when they came to the league. And I think there's going to be a different set of expectations for him where if Ime Udoka sees him doing something wrong or he blows a defensive coverage or whatever, the leash might not be super loose or there might not be a super long leash, I should say this time around for the Rockets rookies, as opposed to these past couple years where Jalen and Jabari were given free reign to make as many mistakes as they wanted to make, and there were no consequences whatsoever. If Amen Thompson goes out there and starts making mistakes left, right, and center, then I fully expect Ime Udoka to rein him in and say, hey, this is where you're wrong, this is what's going on, and this is why I'm benching you so that you can focus on these mistakes and get them cleaned up, because those are mistakes that we can't exactly afford to have out there. But it's also this weird balancing act of how do you prioritize wanting to play winning basketball, but also wanting to make sure you get enough developmental run in there for your number 4 overall pick, and Amen Thompson. As far as style of basketball, which is the next question that we have on the table for these guys, it's really tough to say. You look up and down this roster and you think a really fast-paced run and gun style, with so many athletes on this roster, getting them out in transition is going to be almost the bread and butter of this team. But I feel like it's almost lazy to say, for a team to say, oh yeah, our priority is to get out in transition and get easy baskets, right? You need to have more to your offensive identity than just, okay, we want to get out and run. We want to get out and be fast, right? That's the blanket type of offensive goals that a bad team wants to throw out there. That's exactly what the Rockets said last season. They were like, we're going to get out there, we're going to be fast, we're going to be young, we're going to be exciting, and they were a dumpster fire. I have been beating this drum for so long, and I will continue to do so, and I'm hopeful that we are finally going to see it put into effect, is just lean into Alperen Sengun already. Lean into the dynamic playmaking big who is uber talented, who can make life easier for his teammates, who can create opportunities for others, who demands a double team consistently when he has the basketball. Lean into him as your point center, your offensive fulcrum, your shin hub, whatever you want to call it, whatever cutesy little name you want to give it. Involve Alperen Sengun more offensively. And yes, there's going to be versions of this team that are playing without Alp on the floor. There's going to be versions of this team with Jabari at the 5, or you're playing small ball, or maybe with Jock Landale out there. Sure. There's going to be plenty of iterations of this team that do not involve Alperen Sengun. And even when he's on the floor, it doesn't mean he has to touch the basketball every single time down. It doesn't mean that every single play has to be run through him. But I would like to see an honest effort put forward by the coaching staff, by Ime Udoka and company, to run some offense through Alperen Sengun, to get creative with how they generate offensive looks for guys like Jalen Green, like Jabari Smith Jr., like Fred VanVleet, using Alperen Sengun as the focal point offensively to draw the attention of the defense. That's what NBA basketball is all about, right? It's all about creating an offensive advantage, and when you have better, more talented players, you're able to more easily create an offensive advantage. Alperen Sengun is quite oftentimes a better, more talented big than the other team has. Or even if he's not arguably more talented, he makes himself look like he is more talented when he's matched up against opposing bigs, because there's very few bigs in the NBA that can actually one-on-one check Alperen Sengun without having to foul him. And if you send a double team at him, he's smart enough to find the open man, to kick the basketball back out, and then that's easy offense, right? That's how you break down a defense, and then you create easy opportunities for the other guys on the floor. So I've said it again. I've said it once. I've said it twice. I've said it 17 million times. I'm going to continue to say it. I would like to see them lean into Alperen Sengun offensively this next season. And I do think that based on everything that we know about Ime Udoka and how he wants to play basketball, how he wants guys to be unselfish, that he does already really enjoy the idea, at least in theory, behind Alperen Sengun's passing ability as a big. And the fact that we've seen Al Horford kind of occupy a similar-esque role with the 1 year that Ime Udoka was with the Boston Celtics, I think we're actually going to finally see Shin-Hub in full effect. Coming up, want to get into the final questions here about some of the coverage to be expecting this next season. What is realistically a successful season for the Rockets, plus my own personal Houston Rockets Mount Rushmore. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked on Rockets. Now, next question we've got on the list. Will you interview any of the players pre and post game once the regular season starts? Absolutely. That's what I do. So as soon as Rockets basketball is back, we will have the pre and post game interviews. And I decided to do things a little bit differently. Probably about a month or so, or basically around summer league time. For a while last season, I was running kind of both channels. I had the LOR YouTube channel, and then I had my own personal YouTube channel where I was publishing all of the interviews and all that stuff. I just decided to combine the two and just start posting all of the player interviews, whether they're pre and post game interviews, whether it's random Rockets events, all of that. You can find all of that. It's all going to be now located on the LOR YouTube account. So from here until I stop talking about Rockets basketball, all the interviews will always be posted there. So there's already a couple that are up, some recent ones from Jabari Smith Jr. and Cam Whitmore doing some community events here in Houston, so you can go check those out. But every single pre and post-game interview, practice interview, shoot-arounds, all of that should all be available on the LOR YouTube channel this upcoming season. Yes, and I did, thankfully, due to some, or not due to, but with some help from some of the awesome individuals in the Rockets digital and videography department, I was able to procure some upgrades to my mobile interview setup. So hopefully the sound quality and video quality and stuff will be a little bit better this time around for the player interviews that we're going to have throughout the regular season. So be on the lookout for all of that right here on the LOR YouTube. Who do you predict to be your Rockets MVP, DPOY, and most improved player this year? First off, I want to say I loved this question, and I love this question so much, I want to turn it into a full episode. So I'm going to have to cop out on this answer momentarily because I want to do this as a full episode with one of our weekly co-hosts, which is a perfect time to tee up that starting next week. So starting with, I believe, Labor Day, whatever the Monday holiday is, Labor Day. We'll be back to 5 days a week. August was super relaxed, very infrequent on the episode front as it goes kind of every offseason. We hit the dog days of the NBA offseason and things get kind of really chill here at LOR as it does for the entire Locked On network. But starting, I believe, September 4th. Yeah, we'll be back in the swing of things 5 days a week. All of your usual suspects, your weekly co-hosts, Madison, Ben, Ali Khan, and Frank will all be back in rhythm here on the show once per week. So it should be a ton of fun. So be on the lookout for that. But again, we will tackle the MVP, DPOY, and most improved player on another episode because I really like that question. And I feel like that warrants a full discussion, not just a quick segment in a mailbag episode. So shout out to that question asker because that one was fantastic. What is realistically a successful season for the Rockets? I think this question is going to vary no matter who, depending on who you ask. Some people will say it's not a successful season if they don't make the play-in tournament. I think that's a bit harsh because you look at the state of the Western Conference, and in fact, I want to actually pull this up. I should have had it pulled up before I started talking in this segment, but RIP, terrible show prep. We're filling, we're talking, and where are the standings? Okay, there it is. Thank you. Anyways, you look at the state of the Western Conference last season. The Mavericks missed the playoffs and they won 38 games. The Jazz missed the playoffs. They won 37. The Blazers won 33. The Rockets and Spurs were realistically the only two teams that did not care at all about making the playoffs in the West. And we're basically doing that same thing again this next season. There are 13 teams out of 15 in the Western Conference that would like to probably make the playoffs. The only two teams that probably don't care at all about the playoffs are the Spurs, and then you just flip the Blazers for the Rockets. So of those 13 teams, which three are going to be left out of the playoff picture entirely, right? Do you look at the Rockets leapfrogging the Utah Jazz or the Dallas Mavericks at 37 and 38 wins? My spicy hot take is I think we might see a Western Conference that doesn't have a team crack 50 wins. Honestly, we'll have the Denver Nuggets who are on a championship hangover, and they're going to be trying to rest guys. They're not nearly as deep as they were last season, losing key contributors like Bruce Brown and Jeff Green. So I think there's a world where maybe the Denver Nuggets take things a little bit easier in the regular season. We see some more rest games for Nikola Jokic and some of their other key contributors. I don't necessarily think the Nuggets could crack 50 wins. And then the Grizzlies were the only other team in the West that cracked 50 wins. And they're going to be missing Ja Morant for a chunk of the season. So there's very realistically a world where the West, as stacked as it is, you see a West that's way more flattened out to where there could be teams that win close to 40 games or even break into the 40-win territory, and they don't even make the play-in tournament, right? The New Orleans Pelicans were the final team the OKC Thunder were the final team in the play-in tournament this past go-around at a 40-42 record. And I think there could be a team that hits 40 wins and doesn't even sniff the play-in tournament this next season. So when you look at some of the expectations for this team next year, I've penciled in 35 wins. I think 35 wins would be a fantastic, improvement compared to where this team was last year at 22 wins. A 13-win jump is almost unheard of. So for me, even though phase 2 is officially started and we're looking at a Rockets team that wants to start winning again, wants to start playing meaningful basketball games, wants to get back to the playoffs, all that, I think it's a bit harsh to judge Ime Udoka and the veterans that are brought in and this young group of guys if they don't make the playoffs. I think if you see tangible progress being made, if you see this team taking those steps towards improvement where maybe they win 35 games or they win 37 or 38 and they're right on the precipice of making the play-in tournament, and it's just because the Western Conference is such a bloodbath that they miss out, not because they're a bad team that they missed out, but just because it's so hard to come by some wins, I think that should still absolutely be, categorized as a very successful season. And then you have to look at the internal growth of some of these guys, right? I think that's more so how you're going to judge how the Rockets look this next season is, do we see Jalen Green take a leap? Do we see Alperen take a leap? Does Jabari look better? Does Tari look better? How does Ime Udoka incorporate Amen Thompson as a rookie compared to what we saw Steven Silas do with Jalen and Jabari these past 2 seasons? I think there are a million different ways that you can gauge and judge how well this team does, and kind of the expectations for this team without just looking at the wins and losses in the record book, at least for me personally. So I think a successful season entails a few different things. But I think it's much more than just at the end of the day, just the wins and losses in the record book. Last couple questions here. Do you think the Rockets will see a bigger gain from their starting unit or bench unit this year? In other words, what will help us get more wins this season? Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks starting over KPJ and KJ/EG, or KPJ and Amen coming off the bench over Nix and Josh Christopher? That's a fantastic question. And I actually want to revisit this. I'm going to have to remember to revisit this. And somewhere like in the middle part of the season, I want to go in and dig in and see what the on-off numbers look like with KPJ and Amen as a 2-man unit versus say Nix and Christopher as a 2-man. I don't know. I want to go and actually dig into some of the deeper meaning deep-seated numbers behind this, because I do think it's a really interesting question. I think that VanVleet and Dillon Brooks are going to probably bring more to the starters, if only because they're going to bring so much more defensively than their counterparts did. And I think that adding VanVleet and Brooks to the starting unit is going to do wonders for elevating the play of guys like Jalen and Jabari and Sengun, right? The Rockets defense last year was Swiss cheese. Adding 2 fantastic point of attack defenders in VanVleet and Dillon Brooks is going to elevate the defense considerably. You also now have a bit more added pressure on Jabari to hold up his end of the bargain of being a good defender. Sengun won't look nearly as bad as he did because you'll have better perimeter defense. And then with all these other guys playing solid defense, you're going to have Jalen Green, who isn't going to want to be the one dragging ass of the starters. So he's probably going to be playing better defense because you've got all 5 guys, or 3 of the other 5 starters around him playing exceptional defense. So I think the starters are going to see a very significant boost from Van Vliet and Dillon Brooks in the starting lineup, but Amen Thompson and KPJ has a lot of potential to be a very, very exciting backcourt duo. And for all the strife that we've been through with KPJ, for all the ups and the downs with KPJ, I have said so many different times, and I will continue to echo this sentiment. I think that him being moved into this new role and taken away from the starting lineup and hopefully being given yet another second chance, but with Ime Udoka, I guess, to embody this 6th-man role and get back to his roots, I think it's going to be a fantastic shift for him. And I think mentally, as long as he embraces the role, I think we could see the best version of KPJ that we've seen to this point in a Rockets jersey. I know we've seen some spectacular stuff out of him, but him getting back to his roots, playing that dynamic 2-guard off the bench and playing it in tandem with Amen Thompson, where he's able to play more off ball, where Amen Thompson can create opportunities for him to be a catch and shoot threat, because we know he's a fantastic catch and shoot player. He could sneakily be one in the race for 6th man of the year this next season. I would not be shocked if the Rockets are playing some high-level basketball, if they're chasing a playoff spot. KPJ might be in the 6th man of the year conversation. Ooh, pardon me. All right. Final question we've got here. Ooh, all right. Thank God for the mute button. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of all-time Houston Rockets players? I love this question because it's different no matter who you ask. It's a fun one to close out on. And definitely let me know, give me your Mount Rushmore of Houston Rockets players in the YouTube comments, because I'm so curious to see what everybody else thinks. But conventional wisdom says that the first 2 spots should be absolute locks, and that's Hakeem Olajuwon, number 1. You can't go without Hakeem. And then James Harden has to be number 2. He's the 2nd greatest player in franchise history. So those first 2 spots are easy. It's the spots 3 and 4 that get a little complicated. Now, the person who asked me this said Houston Rockets players. So if we're just going by caliber of player, I feel like I have to say Moses Malone and then Clyde Drexler. Now, if we're going with their overall importance to the organization, what they meant to the Rockets organizationally, then I change my answer to Calvin Murphy and Yao Ming. And then there's a bit of a mix of both, where if you factor in his time as the head coach, then I think Rudy T takes that 3rd spot very easily. In fact, I think there's an argument to be made to put Rudy T over James Harden at number 2 on the Mount Rushmore of Houston Rockets, we'll say individuals rather than just players, because when you combine Rudy T's playing career plus his coaching career as the greatest coach in Houston Rockets history, it's almost an unfair balance. But that's why I think the answer is always so interesting, because you get the old heads who talk about, well, Rudy T is a player plus his coaching. And then in that last one, if I'm going Rudy T in that regard, I think I would probably go I'd go with a combination. I go Rudy T, and I think I'd probably still put Yao on there. Maybe there's a little bit of my own bias in there, because I really started to fall in love with basketball. Like Steve Francis made me got me into basketball. But then T-Mac and Yao made me really fall in love with the game. And so I'll always have a bit of a bias and affinity towards anything Yao Ming related. But then when you look at his impact, not only for the Houston Rockets, just his player impact, the fact that he was, an all-star every year of his career, he could have gone down as one of the greatest bigs of all time, such a unique player. But then what he did for the game past just the on-court presence, right? He bridged 2 countries between America and China. He helped really make basketball a globalized sport. And I don't know, Yao's just an awesome dude. So such a wholesome individual. It's hard to leave him off of that list, but I'm so curious. Give me your thoughts on your Houston Rockets Mount Rushmore. Drop your Mount Rushmores in the YouTube comments. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, and on YouTube, just search Locked on Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.